Welcome to the MOGL podcast. I'm Tim Bryson, Director of Athlete Education and Compliance, and I'm the host of our show. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning community member, welcome back. As y'all know, the MOGL podcast is dedicated to educating all NIL athletes and brands on how to ensure compliance, how to maximize NIL activity, and how to make a difference in the ever-evolving NIL landscape. Today we have a trailblazer, truly history maker, someone who has not just set the standard, but has continued to raise the bar on what it means to develop athletes' brands and helping them identify who they are, elevating their reach to be global leaders in their local and global community. This person is a husband, first and foremost, a SoCal native, former All-SEC and All-American, which we'll talk about as well in the pod, and currently serves as a Senior Associate Athletic Director for Athlete Brand Development and Inclusive Excellence at none other than the flagship, the University of Arkansas. So without further ado, Brother Terry Prentice, what's popping, bro? Welcome to the MOGL pod.
Hey, man, great to be on. Great to be on. You're doing some incredible work in the space, so I'm honored to be able to jump on and talk about what we do at Arkansas to, best serve and amplify our student athletes through name, image, and likeness.
No, for sure. And I think everyone at this point knows it was, many people hate it, some people love it, but it is what it is. The Wild Wild West back in 2021. But in that dust, right, as it began to settle, before it settled truly, Arkansas was the first, right? Like y'all were the flagship, not just obviously in the state, but across the United States in regards to prioritizing NIL, which we'll talk about during segment 2. Because more important than that, right, your story has not just informed who you are, but also how you choose to lead. So Terry, segment 1, talk to us more about what's your story.
Yeah. So you touched on it a bit, but Southern California native, raised in a tremendous household, 2 loving parents, Ernest and Gloria Prentice. Both of them are from the South. Mom's from Arkansas, dad's from East Texas, just outside of Texarkana. So I always had some ties back to this region, but was raised in Southern California, had a great opportunity to take my talents to the next level from a track and field standpoint. And so when I was being recruited, actually decided to stay close to home and attend USC out of high school. They were hot at the time. Football was rolling. Pete Carroll had those guys going. And I think that bled into their recruiting efforts in a host of other sports. So decided to stay close to home out of high school. And then, like our student athletes face now was, faced with some adversity. You're away from home for the first time, dealing with all sorts of different factors and variables. Living in an off-campus apartment that's still considered campus housing. So learning how to really be away from home, training environment's different. You're in a major city, second largest city in America. But with all those things, just decided that I needed to change and went back to the recruiting process. And that was different then. There was no transfer portal. So you had to do it the old fashioned way and take calls from coaches and, client's office, let people know that you were willing to transfer, and landed at the University of Arkansas, school that I really considered out of high school, but didn't truly consider for those reasons I had mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The awesome opportunity to start over, choose a college town. Got a lot of family inside the state and in the area, and family members that attended the university. So, including my moves to Ole Miss and to Kansas, really tell people I've been here the better part of 15 years. And fast forward through my career, was a SAC president, so got involved really early. Student Athlete Advisory Committee, much at the urging of Dr. Eric Wood, who was a tremendous mentor to me, and something I'll talk about later. We all need mentors in life and need those brothers and sisters that we can rely on to tell us those things that we don't want to hear, but also, push us to be greater than we think we could be. That was Dr. Wood, or as I just call him, Eric. So just Eric and Wood, and he pushed me and got me involved with student athlete leadership. And fast forward to the end of my college career, had a department, worked with him, worked with academics, student athlete development, and our development office at the Razorback Foundation. But really just got a great, well-rounded experience as a GA, and when opportunity to go to Ole Miss as a development assistant, work with some tremendous people there, but then very quickly was lured back to the University of Arkansas to work at the Razorback Foundation in an all-encompassing development role. So annual fund, major gifts, premium seating, manage parking, which is a chore here in the SEC. Did that. Then University of Kansas with another mentor, Jeff Long, who was the athletic director at Arkansas, my athlete and a young professional. And he gave me to really expand my opportunities and still work in fundraising, oversee a sport or sports with track and field and cross country. And then DEI to the department at Kansas, really get involved in HR. And so we were able to really streamline some things in the hiring process and open some people's eyes and some framework that I'm really proud of. And I'm proud of the work some of, my former colleagues there now, and they've taken it to even greater height. All that said, never thought that I'd work in the NIL space. Didn't really pay attention to what NIL was going to be. To be honest, we'd kind of cast it off. And California had done this crazy thing back in 2019, 2020. I think it was 2019. Governor had signed this bill in the shop. I thought it was absolutely nuts. And started learning a little bit more about NIL, and I was like, man, this is actually empowering. And if I had a chance to do it all over again as a track and field athlete, right, an athlete in a equivalency sport, so I definitely wasn't on a full ride at Arkansas. We were trying to win championships, so 12 and a half scholarships only goes so far on a team of 50 athletes. I definitely could have tapped into NIL and done some private lessons and might have worked with a local restaurant. I mean, I would have just hustled and tried to find a way. Thought about it like, man, there really is an opportunity here for all student athletes, but in particular, not just those in your your highest profile sports: football, men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, particularly here in the South, volleyball, track and field. Got some unique opportunities. So Hunter Yurachek had reached out about a position we're going to be having back in my alma mater. Wanted me to take a look at it, see if it would be a fit. Went through the interview process, things happened to work out. And so here I am to develop a program from scratch. Had some framework that was done by a working group inside the department before I was hired in March of 21. But yeah, I was able to jump right in and take that awesome framework that our colleagues had put together, but then kind of put my own twist on it, and really wanted to lean in on being the flagship university of the state and play to that and use that in recruiting, use that with our student athletes, and really just help them understand that they're treated as celebrities here in Arkansas, because we don't have any major professional sports teams really outside of, minor league baseball. So, really the Razorbacks are it, and our student athletes are here at the forefront. And so we've really tried to lean into that and let that be our guiding light and our principle as we developed our program. So fast forward to now, I mean, man, it's been a whirlwind. We're excited to be here, and our state's got a state law that we feel pretty good about. It's very student athlete friendly, as we like to call it, student athlete friendly, and it's where we are.
I love that, and I'm glad and appreciate that you took the time to be extensive and detailed, in your story to this point. And you mentioned that the athletes are, at the forefront of what you do. I think we definitely see that not just on social, but also the programming and feedback that I've seen from Arkansas athletes. But y'all fans are also pretty special. And so, quick story, bro. SEC is very different. We know that, right? I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina. And as an athletic training student, bro, we took a bus from Columbia, South Carolina to the University of Arkansas to work the game at Arkansas. And I think it was kickoff. And all I heard was like, woo pig suey or woo pig suey. And I was like, what's going on, yo? But Arkansas has got you to come back a couple times now, right? Like, what is so special about the flagship, right? Will Baggett talks about this with Mississippi, Lamar rep Chicago, have you? Like, what's so special about Arkansas for those who may not know or be aware?
Yeah, man. It's crazy. We're a small state. We've got 3 million people, proud state, but specific to Northwest Arkansas, where the university is located, it's kind of the best of both worlds, right? In that it's rural, but we've got the big city feeling that Walmart, JB Hunt, Tyson Foods, all headquarters here out of Northwest Arkansas. They call this their home. So their executives, their employees, they're typically from here, but then they'll, draw talent from around the country and really around the world. But taking that a step further, Walmart kind of issued an edict about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, that any any supplier, any vendor that was doing business with Walmart. So anyone that sold a product in Walmart stores had to have an office in Northwest Arkansas. So
Wow.
again, that means Procter and Gamble and Coke and Pepsi and Gatorade and Kellogg's, and you just start going through the list, Johnson and Johnson and everyone else. You're like, oh my God, like, and so you got people that move here from Chicago and from the Pacific Northwest and Southern California, Northern California, and Florida and Atlanta, and then you get people that come here from overseas, have to be here to do business, and so the area has really exploded from a population standpoint, but also just the from a socioeconomic standpoint. You've got some titans from a business standpoint pumping money back into the economy, so it's an attractive place to draw students, and the university's also had some very aggressive recruitment efforts in terms of providing in-state tuition to any state that borders Arkansas, in addition to Illinois, right? So you're pulling, the St. Louis area, you're pulling the Chicagoland. They've extended down to Georgia, so you're pulling students out of the Atlanta area and Metro Atlanta that are, getting in-state tuition here in Arkansas. So it's really just become an attractive place for both students and then, young professionals, and they're moving their families here. They're starting their careers here. So again, Northwest Arkansas is a very, very special place, and our facilities are top notch, and people are phenomenal, and yeah, so it just becomes home. And so, whenever there's a career opportunity at the university, at least for me, I've been able to reflect back on that and let that be, something that I'd want to come back to. But particularly when we're recruiting new employees, they come in, they fall in love with the place, and it's hard for them to leave. And even sometimes in our business, as we know, we're losing people through the great, resignation, but people are staying in Northwest Arkansas. They're staying in the state because they're finding other things outside of sport. And so, yeah, again, to answer your question, in that flagship university here, definitely it's even that much sweeter.
I love that. You definitely recruited me to come down in spring 23. I think I host the Razorback relays. Yeah. I don't need a field pass, but I need a field pass. So I'm telling you that right now on the record when I get down there.
I got you, man. I got you.
I appreciate it. So moving to segment 2, Doug, like, as I mentioned before, y'all were the first state, right? The first university to hire someone exclusively and dedicated to student athlete brand development, though we're the 11th state to pass this legislation, right? So clearly it was a priority for the institution, right? Clearly it was something of significance that y'all wanted to infuse, not just in student athlete development, but also diversity, equity, inclusion as well. But for someone who's serving as the role as senior associate AD for brand development and inclusive excellence, first, just talk to us more about what does that mean, right? Because some people that may listen who don't work in sport may not have a clue. But then 2, talk to us more about not your day-to-day, but strategic priorities in your role, given that your day-to-day, of course, not the same.
Yeah. So, first you got to give kudos where kudos are due. So, my year at Czech was visionary in that he wanted to have somebody in-house, and particularly a former student athlete that was in-house that would really just be a mentor to the student athletes, right? Be in the nutrition center, be at practice, and really just be present and visible on a day-to-day basis. And so that was first and foremost, as opposed to, and there's really nothing wrong with these groups, but as opposed to at that time hiring a third party to provide education and build the relationship with student athletes and parents, and now attorneys, agents, financial advisors, and all the above. So that really led to the role being housed here. We've got 2 offices, so we've got one in our admin suite, up in the north end zone of the football stadium, but then day to day really live in our student athlete success center with student athlete development. So alongside student athlete development in this office suite, and thankfully I've had help. So you're nothing without help. So Sydney McGlone served as our athlete brand development coordinator, former gymnast here, GA in the AD's office, knows our student athletes, knows our staff. So she joined me not too long after I began as our coordinator, and then was able to recruit Lauren Hawkins to come from University of Kansas, where I had crossed paths with her to come be our graduate assistant. And so really our 3-person team, I felt like just had, the knowledge, the passion, and really the presence to be able to jump in day one and just be all things to our student athletes and then the external stakeholders too. And so we hit the ground running. So with that day to day, I think in my relationships with our head coaches and the assistants, relationship with Learfield, so all of our corporate partners, making sure they're educated on what involved, manage our relationship with our questions, and there are many of the ones that own businesses or representing businesses or different interests. And then a close-knit relationship with both our director of licensing, Jerry Thorpe, and our general counsel, Matt McCoy, just because we feel like NIL really just affects what we do and they do on a day-to-day basis. But then beyond that, communications and student athlete development, obviously academic staff, our learning specialists. I mean, we really hit just about every, feel like through a year and a half or a year and a few months, but really a year and a half of being back here, NIL really does touch the entire athletics department. Find something from an NIL standpoint in every area. And not to mention compliance, obviously, having that close-knit relationship with them. So day to day, I feel like I manage more of the higher level things, but also not afraid to get in the weeds and quite honestly, not afraid to work with any student athlete to the door. But thankfully, I've been able to have the privilege of having. And since then, Sydney's moved on and works for One Arkansas NIL. It's our collective. And then Lauren now is assistant director of student athlete development, but she's got an office right across from mine. So I could holler at her just about any time I need something. And have a GA now, Nicole Edison, who's doing a fantastic job and was a former student athlete herself at Arkansas Little Rock track and field team. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we do. And honestly, try to just be as accessible and as transparent and as real as we can with our student athletes. And then beyond that, parents, agents, and attorneys now, because it's going to change, right? We used to shoo those people off outside of the parents, really, as long as intercollegiate athletics has been around. And well, now we're having to close because we want to make sure that they understand where the lines are, and they want to make sure that they understand on our side what's going on, what conversations they're having, what they're doing, because they might represent a student athlete. They're not seeing them on a day-to-day basis like we are. So we want to be able to, be as communicative and transparent as possible.
That's real. And I think one thing you mentioned, right, was not just having help, but being both at the macro and the micro level, if you will, as far as your involvement in NIL, athlete brand development. But could you talk more about some of the programs that you've done over the last, 15, 16 months in educating not just athletes, but as you mentioned before, attorneys, right, local employers and businesses that want to partner with Arkansas athletes as well? Yeah.
So as I think back, one of the first things we did was create a pilot program in May of 21. So we selected 25 student athletes that we thought, and a lot of this, I had help from student athlete development and really, again, the folks in the working group ahead of time that had put some framework together, but selected 25 student athletes, primarily those sports that were on campus at the time. So it was football and men's basketball and women's basketball. And then we sprinkled in a few gymnasts and volleyball players and track and field student athletes and some others, but just had a boot camp and worked with our Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovations, put together some curriculum. So it was all things from improv, day one, just learn, be nimble and learning how to communicate on the fly, and also, coordinate what you think your core values and your pitch would want to be. So from that to some sample size financial education, really hit hard what we thought at the time were going to be the NIL rules and regulations. And we just based everything off of our state law. And then had a former student athlete panel a few times and allowed them to work and really just hear from former student athletes who've gone on to be business leaders out in Northwest Arkansas. And so did that during summer session 1. July 1st came, and then we had summer session 2 and had a second group of 25 student athletes from some different sports come in and take advantage of that. So honestly, we felt like that gave us some street cred with the student athletes, particularly the ones we felt were leaders, right? Particularly publicly, and going to have some NIL opportunities. In that, hey, disclosing is a good thing. We're not the police. We're here because disclosing helps us protect you and helps us look at things ahead of time before they go out. Really went through what our sponsors were doing, helped some of our student athletes understand who they were on a macro level. So yeah, it really felt like we just gained some trust and gained some credibility with our student athletes by doing that ahead of July 1. But then fast forward, I got to give a shout out to my man Cam Cox at Illinois, because he was the pilot and architect. I believe Illinois was the first school to host some kind of an open house, which has become popular now. And so we ended up following suit and had our open house in August of last year, ahead of our first football weekend. And really that allowed an opportunity to have 100 different businesses there from around the state, and really us to talk about, where we were at that time and what NIL is and what we'd seen through the first 2 months, and really how they could be a few other open house events that have actually involved student athletes. And now we're delving into networking nights, partnering with student athlete development and doing the career piece we've always done, but now bringing in individuals that are interested from an NIL standpoint, companies that have been engaged in the NIL space. So again, some of the interesting things, I guess, innovative things we feel like we've done beyond that, using our social media from an NIL standpoint, athlete brand development, to really amplify what our young people are doing, gain them more followers, and really help share their story and tell their story. And then lastly, I think one of the core things I think we've done, and this is where DEI really comes into play, particularly from a socioeconomic standpoint, right? And lack of opportunities at a younger age. And NIL has become a great equalizer. Allows some people to grow up pretty quickly, which is awesome. Personal conversations with some student athletes that might be receiving some federal aid, right? And getting with compliance in our eligibility office and understanding, okay, who's receiving Pell Grants, and let's sit down and have a conversation about how that might affect your eligibility moving forward if you're taking these NIL opportunities, and how does that affect your situation at home and whoever's claiming you, and are you adjusting those things? I mean, we really try to be intentional about just having those conversations and working with the player development staff members on, our different sport programs, really help us and be our advocates in that regard. So yeah, honestly, Tim, I'd say that those are probably the key things that stick out to me, and things that we've been able to do over this last year and a half that have been successful.
No, I appreciate you naming that. I think, you keep reiterating communication, but I think what's special about Arkansas and what you're doing at the flagship is how you're communicating, right? And who you're choosing to communicate and when, which clearly makes a difference in, how you continue to evolve and, grow your program to where it is today. But I want to make sure that we're mindful of time and get to my favorite segment 3, action items. So 3 things you want our audience to remember and leave with after our conversation today, right? You mentioned a lot of dope things around communication, around being the first, around your athlete co-construction and team, having a dope team that you work with. But just 3 things you want our audience to take away after our conversation today.
Yeah, I'd say NIL is empowering. So, through, a year and some change, I think we've been able to sift through some data. We've been able to see, these national articles and press releases that have been put out, and these big numbers that have been out there. But I think through the work we've been doing on campus, and being able to really have that day-to-day I think we understand that, NIL is empowering, and that we have to take time to celebrate, taking what we've already done in student athlete development or student athlete enhancement, whatever you call it at your institution, really just taking that to the next level. To me, I think about the Life Skills program that was developed in the 90s, right? And so we've had this around for 30 years, but we've really never having money with them now, right? And while they're 18 to 22 or 23. So I think now we just have an opportunity to take what we've already been teaching, and we've had tremendous professionals in this business, really put in the work, and just take that to the next level. And I think NIL just provided a pathway to being able to allow that to happen sooner, and us being able to do it and have those conversations while they're here on campus, as opposed to this job that's waiting for you once you're 23, 24, 25, and got some student athletes that are making some life-changing money. And by life-changing, I do mean $10,000, $15,000, not $1 million. So that's one. Second thing, time is energy. So student athletes and brands, I think have to be mindful of time demands placed on student athletes. I think many of our young folks have learned quite a bit about where they want to place their energy over this first year, and how to navigate practice and mental health and some other things. And so that's another one. Time is energy. And I think we have to also remember that student athletes only have so much time in a day to be able to do what they have to do. And the team being successful still matters as well. And their success still matters at the end of the day. So, Tim, I just would love for folks to not assume, right? And it goes for student athlete brands, but in particular from a brand standpoint, really don't assume. So, we do facilitate here. And when we facilitate, say that we're trying to have the brand keep an open mind as to who all of our student athletes are and all they have to offer and what they can be. Because I think a lot of times what you see in marketing is a business will their demographic or what they want to be marketed, right, and be promoted. And I think we've got a ton of stories. And so I'd encourage, my counterparts or anyone that's working in the NIL space at, a certain institution to try to get to know your student athletes as well as you can, understand their stories, and let that guide you, I guess, when you're having conversations with brands and businesses, if you're able to do so on your campus, if you're able to have conversations and facilitate with a brand or a business.
Yeah, well said, my man. You sent me your storytelling, so you got me excited. But I'll say this conversation is one I love doing on podcasts. Like I love being a facilitator. But definitely over the last 30 minutes, I felt like I've been in class. Like just soaking up knowledge and learning from you. So I definitely appreciate that, Mr. TP, if you will. But before we go, dog, I don't know if you can get your doctorate. If you are, I'll manifest it with you before you. But before we go, man, like who you want to see or hear from on the pod? Who we need to get on here?
Man, you got to get Cam Cox on here. I know I shouted him out earlier, and I don't know if you haven't already, but Cam Cox, he's director of NIL at University of Illinois. A tremendous resource. I learned from him every day. We talk pretty regularly just because I think he's seeing it. He's seeing it in a different conference, a different region of the country. But he is of the SEC, both bachelor's and law degree. But he's a very, very interesting individual that I think a great guest here on the podcast.
Say less, Cam. We coming for you. Terry, bro, thank you so much for your time. Razorback relays, I'm coming. Field pass, I might need 2 or 3, but we'll be there. I appreciate you, dog.
TB, appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Always, man. Everyone else, man, be safe. See y'all next week on our next episode of the MOGL podcast. Let's ride. Get MOGL.